Would this bother you? My husband has a daughter from a previous relationship. He has a giant tattoo on his arm with her name. However, he doesn't want to get a tattoo of our daughter's name. His excuse is he doesn't want more tattoos. It makes me so mad. All I can think is one day our daughter is going to ask why he doesn't have her name, but he has her stepsisters. Am I being petty? Okay. Number one, she is not a stepsister. She is a half sister. They are actually biological sisters. I think that this separation here that she makes between her and her sister is kind of a sad one because it implies that she, as her daughter, should be worth more than the sister. Am I being petty? Yes, OP, you are being petty. I do get the point. I actually think that if he's a good person, if he's a good dad, he would be able to explain this to his daughter without much of a problem. I think it's fair enough to say, hey, there was a period of time in my life where I was really into this tattoo thing and I thought it was cool, but now when I got a bit older, I realized that that wasn't for me and that maybe I could honor my relationship with my daughter in a different way, that I don't necessarily have to have it tattooed on my arm or on my body or somewhere permanent on my skin, because that does not diminish the relationship that I have with either of my daughters. And you can see that in terms of how he interacts with his daughters and the type of relationship that he's able to build with them over time. I don't think that this is a very difficult conversation to have. It sounds to me like this bothers you, like the OP, more than it would in theory bother the daughter. And this is one thing that adults do quite often, which kind of bugs me, which is when they sit there and they go, hey, but what about the child? And I'm not actually sure you're thinking about it too hard from your kid's perspective, because I think if you did think about it from your kid's perspective, you'd probably understand that the kid cares a lot more about the relationship that they have with their dad than the tattoos, and any other meaning that they assign to a tattoo is going to come from the adults in their life who explain it to them or who make comments to them, and the type of attitude that the adults have, that these are the things that they'll kind of soak up, because kids are sponges and they soak up whatever goes on around them. The very first response to this is, I get it, it would bother me too. And that still says to me that this is coming from the adults, that as the second partner, the second mother to one of his kids, you have this feeling of comparison, or you have an inherent need to compare yourself to his previous mother. And I totally get where that comes from. It's one of the problems that I would argue comes up a lot with blended families, and probably something that you can't really avoid because that's one of the aspects of blended families. But if you feel a little bit insecure about your position, and if that's where this is coming from, then that's a totally different problem, and that should be dealt with in a very, very different way. But this is not the conversation to have about it. The second comment also says, I definitely see where you're coming from. However, was it a tattoo he got when he was young and doesn't have a lot of other tattoos? I could also see him not wanting more tattoos in that situation. But if he is loaded up with every other type of tattoo, then it's definitely strange. And even here, if he is loaded up with every other type of tattoo, I would argue that that's irrelevant. If he has decided that tattooing his daughter's names on his body is not something that he wants to continue doing, then that's totally within his rights. Now, if you have a second daughter, and then he tattoos the second daughter's name, but not the first one, then probably you can kind of ask what's up with that. Maybe he doesn't like that daughter especially much, but that would be a kind of a cruel way to make that point. Some people do say unequivocally, absolutely not. It's his body, his choice. He most likely changed his mindset, and that's okay. And I would fundamentally agree with that. I do think it's his choice, but I also think it's completely okay to say, hey, if this is a conflict that comes up with our daughter at some point in the future, then you're responsible for dealing with it, because that's fair enough. It's a question that she would have towards him and not towards anyone else. I don't think there was anything else in the comments. I'm not sure I see both sides. I have a lot of tattoos and I just don't want any more, but I can also see where you're coming from. Try to let it go. Maybe when your daughter is older, she'll ask and he'll change his mind. That's a bit of a funny response, because the response here is, well, maybe she'll manage to convince him to get one later on when she's a little bit older. Honestly, I don't think tattoos say much about the type of relationship that you have with your parents. And if he focuses his energy there on building a really good relationship with his kid, that it's not going to matter whether he has a tattoo or not. That's also the thing that's most important.